Hello, welcome. This is Francisco Perez with another educational lesson. Alright, so we're going to be continuing. I don't have a computer screen in front of me, so I'm just going to be reading from the book. Alright, so I'm going to get back into the Japanese book. I'm going to continue and finish what I was trying to finish up. And my phone memory is too much. Too little. Alright, let's get into it. It is with the bearers of various Neolithic cultures that the more probable ancestors of the Japanese of today came into the archipelago by this time. So what they're trying to say is that, there's some ancient bones of the ancient Japanese people, and it differs from the modern Japanese, but we find evidence of modern Japanese in and around that time period, meaning modern Japanese is the Kananite people came to Japan and displaced the original or the ancient Japanese people, which I'm going to get into is are known as the Jomon people. And you got to understand, most of these cultures, they never use these names for themselves, but it's what we got to work with today, okay? By this time, of course, the land bridges had submerged underwater, and the most feasible approaches required crossing the narrow stretch of sea separating Japan from the Korean peninsula. Hold on a second. Try to block the wind. It's crazy. Or migrating along the island chains that arch up to Japan from the south or down from the north. Our knowledge of the movements of the early Neolithic people of East Asia is still extremely vague. But if we broaden our view to take in the extended sweep of all the eastern half of Asia, we may obtain some sense of the possibilities of how Japan was peopled. From about 20,000 years ago, it appears that the successive waves of people differing in physical characteristics. So it's saying about 20,000 years ago, it's saying differing peoples came in waves, differing in physical characteristics, moved out of South Central Asia in an easterly direction. The earliest were the Proto Negroid. So the Proto Negroid is like the Oceanic, and all of those Melanesian, and Proto-Caucasoid stock, and it is presumed that survivals of the former are found in the remoter parts of Malay, New Guinea, and the Philippines, and that remnants of the later are found in the Ainu of North Japan and the Bushmen of Australia. A later influx into East Asia brought the ancestors of the Mongoloids, who swept in several waves across the continent, pushing the former inhabitants, meaning the Jomon people, before them, or assimilating them in greater or lesser degree, and that would be the Anu people. The Anu people is amalgamation, and you can see that today in Hawaii, where a lot of the people who have Asian fathers, or Filipino fathers, and Hawaiian mothers, the descendants of these people, or the children of these people, look just like the Anu people. Alright, today the Mongoloids thoroughly dominate East Asia. Their ancestors, as they themselves are today, were divided into a number of subgroups, distinguished by physical type, to be sure, but more importantly, by language and cultural traits. Three prime linguistic divisions of the Mongoloids have roughly geographical identities. In the northern steppe, and the forest lands were various groups of that spoke languages in the Altaic family. And like I showed you, that's why I showed you the Altaic family group. A group of associated languages that include the Turkish, the Mongolian, the Korean, and Japanese. And as like I showed you, it had a lot more different people groups. Most of Central and Southern continental East Asia were occupied by the speakers of the Sinitic group of language. Now, the Sinitic groups of languages also added to the Altaic family. So, the Sinites, which is the Chinese and the Japan and all these other tribe of Sin. So you gotta understand, a lot of these people are tribe of Sin too, but the Chinese are also a tribe of Sin. When their name evolved, it evolved to Shina and then eventually to China. So, and they tell you right here, Sinitic group of languages, which is telling their biblical names, which in itself is a family of languages, is most widespread, but important subfamilies are found in Tibet, Burma, and Indochina. And like I told you, a lot of those people groups, don't matter the color tone, are related, and a lot of the markers is found when they don't have afros. They lost their afro, or they don't have an afro. That's a marker to show the heritage going back to this one group of people who spread all over and displaced the natives or indigenous of those areas, the aboriginals of those areas. The third major group of Mongoloid languages is various termed Austronesian and Malo-Polynesian. Its speakers have come to occupy the southern half of Malay Peninsula and the islands of Southeast Asia as far as Polynesia. Related in counterpoint fashion to the contours of linguistic map, it is evident of early cultural differentiation among the Neolithic inhabitants of East Asia. The northern forest lands became the home of groups of hunters whose social organization was tribal and matrilineal. Okay, the northern forest lands, see, we got to get into this because, okay, so let's start from the beginning. Related in counterpart fashion to the contours of the linguistic map is the evidence of early cultural differentiations among the Neolithic inhabitants of East Asia. The northern forest lands became, what does it mean to become? It meaning it wasn't that and it became that, right? Forest lands became the home groups of the hunters whose social organization was tribal and matrilineal. So it's saying that it became a matrilineal after a group had invaded. The steppes were occupied by nomadic groups whose tribal organization were more commonly based on patrilineal succession. So this is what it's saying. It's saying that the steppes and the northern forest lands were a patrilineal groups, and then an invading group came into the forest lands, the north part of the forest lands, and conquered those groups and imposed their matrilineal system. And then they didn't reach as far as the steppes, so those people continued their patrilineal succession. The vast Yellow River plain gave rise, and us Hebrews are patrilineal. The vast Yellow River plain gave rise to a more sophisticated culture based upon the growing of wheat and millet and the organization of societies into villages. The early inhabitants of what is today's south central China, and the southern coastal area developed a maritime culture that also knew about the growing of irrigated rice. So maritime cultures, that's familiar because we all come from maritime cultures. And finally, in the islands to the south and southeast were found predominantly fishing communities, highly skilled in design of boats, and with a social system characterized by the ritual segregation of sexes. And that's Hawaii for you. That's where my mom's from. That's what it was. Predominantly fishing and agricultural society.
Did I have water?
Of course, hold on. Alright, so we have little precise evidence on the movement of ethnic groups on the Asian continent until fairly recent times. We know, however, that by at least the second millennium BC, and if you learn about the Golden Tara, you'll understand that the Afro-Asiatic people of my family came from Khmer to Taiwan and then to Philippines in the 3rd century. And this is saying, at least the second millennium BC, with the emergence of the Bronze culture supporting an extensive development of government in the Yellow River area, and that's what Ayeta means. It means it has a correlation to the Bronze cultures. Chinese civilization began to exert a constant pressure upon its frontiers, both northward and southward. Such pressure and the periodic warfare between the Chinese and the tribal groups of the northern steppe and forest lands. So this is just showing you right here how these Canaanites came in and warred with the northern steppe and forest lands in Asia, and now they rule it all. Was to create a constant impetus for movement along the people who resided on the periphery on the main body of Chinese civilization. We may presume then that the peopling of the Japanese islands took place first as a result of the dimly observable ethnic movements of the continent, and then as a result of smaller, more localized migrations, perhaps in response to the pressure created by the expansion of the Chinese people. So it's saying by the Sinite people, the Canaanite people created all these migrations because of their expansion. And what do we have in Hawaii? They expanded, they conquered us already. Silent takeover. They're all here, they all live in a beautiful life, and they're all our bosses. They all own the small businesses, and they don't care about you. They treat you like shit. They don't put anything back in the community. They send all their money back home. Ultimately, the flow into Japan tapered off its occasional sporadic wanderings or flights of refugees, but essentially information on the timing, origin, and composition of these formative population movements is still lacking, leaving us with a number of puzzling problems. The question of when the Japanese people actually formed into a coherent national mix cannot be given an exact answer. Was it as early as the 6th or 7th millennium BC, with the appearance of the first bearers of the Neolithic culture? Or was the composition not set until the 3rd century AD? Ooh, there's that 3rd century AD. After succession waves of migrants had each contributed essential ethnic and cultural elements. What happened in 3rd AD? Isn't that when Alexander the Great conquered the Jewish civilizations and made them worship Mother Earth and many gods and eat pig? After successive waves of migrants had each contributed essential ethnic and cultural elements. Another major mystery is the identity of the Ainu, an Aboriginal group now consisting of about 15,000 individuals at the extreme north of the Japanese islands. The once commonly accepted assumption that the Ainu considered to be survivors of a remote Proto-Caucasoid wave of migrants. They are Indo-European Canaanite people who are migrants who mixed with the Jomon people like me, and created another Asian looking people. Like look just like Chinese, but they have fat ass beards. You can say what you want about me, but I don't look Chinese, bro. You got something wrong with you if you think I'm Chinese. I don't look it. I don't look Mongoloid. Show me some Mongoloids. Look just like a lion. Alright, that's where we're at. Wave of migrants were also the descendants of the first Neolithic people who inhabited the entire island chain, has been largely abandoned. But the role that the Ainu people played in Japanese history is still uncertain. They're the Canaanite people who mixed with the Jomon people and became the monarchy to the Imiru, Ibisu Japanese monarchies. Okay, so where we at now? A major controversy persists over whether among the possible sources of Mongoloid stock, the Japanese were formed exclusively from the people entering from the north, that is, from the Altaic-speaking tribal communities, or whether a significant influence is traceable to the Malay-speaking maritime communities to the south. For while in language, social custom, and religions beliefs, the early historic Japanese appeared to affiliate most strongly with the peoples of Northeast Asia, their style of living and language contains tantalizing evidence of southern influence. So everything that they do is has to do with the southern culture. But after they came in and conquered, they added their northern, their ancient beliefs, which changed it, made it different. So as it's strongly affiliated with their culture, it has a lot of our culture within it, because our culture was original and they came in and displaced us. Because see, we was awarded certain lands, and then we were told not to press upon each other's lands, yet they did not listen, and that's what they do today. The archaeological record, once we enter the phase of culture marked by the manufacture of pottery, it is extremely rich. Pottery was introduced in Japan perhaps as far back as 4500 BC, and is associated with the hunting and gathering culture whose remains have been found from the southern Ryukyus to northern Japan, technically at the Mesolithic stage of development. Since they did not practice agriculture, these people lived on game and nuts in the uplands, or on fish and shellfish along the seacoast. And they don't know if they practice agriculture or not. The most commonly evidence of their existence is found in refuse heaps, chiefly shell mounds, which they left scattered about their settlements. Fortunately, the remains of settlements have occasionally been identified and excavated, giving evidence of communities of small sunken hut dwellings. Their inhabitants used tools of stone and bone, including fish hooks and harpoon points. They had developed a laminated bowl, similar to the typical Japanese bowl of historic times. They apparently had domesticated the dog, and they made a variety of hand-shaped pottery, and remarkably so sophisticated design. It is from this pottery that the people were given the name Jomon, this Afro-Asiatic people, or cord pattern, since much of their work is marked with an overall rope-like design like we do. Archaeologists set the disappearance of Jomon pottery in western Japan at about 250 BC, but the pottery and its attended culture lingered much longer in the north. So that was like the last stronghold in the north where we was holding on. Before it was finally superseded by the wave of a more advanced culture. The considerable chronological and regional variation in the Jomon culture style has led archaeologists to postulate several stages of historical development, as well as the possible existence of several different streams of immigration. As for origin, it has generally been supposed that the Jomon people were more closely related to those of the forest cultures of northern Asia and even America. Look at the oldest bone in America. They did a video on it, a lecture. Looks like us, Afro-Asiatic. Looks just like my grandma. Get up out of here. Jomon sites have been produced numerous small, and a lot of these artifacts can be found in Hawaii too, the exact same shit. Grotesque female figurines, and it's believed that these may be evidence of matrilineal-based society. Recently, scholars have begun to claim the discovery of related cultures in New Guinea and even Peru, all the places where the Afro-Asiatic is. You know how long my hair is? You know how freaking long my hair is? But it just bounces right back up. What is certain, however, is that the Jomon people lived and developed in Japan for several millennia and became the creators of one of the most remarkable styles of pottery known to the Stone Age. In richness of design and ingenuity of pattern, it remains unsurpassed. In the 3rd century BC, Jomon culture was disrupted by an influx of a people of startlingly different cultural type. These new people known as Yayo. So, we was there, and in the 3rd century BC, we was pushed out by a Mongoloid people, by stringy-haired people. From the name given, their style of pottery had mastered the use of agriculture and brought with them the technique of irrigated rice cultivation. Their coming marked both the ethnic and technological revolution. Yayo pottery, though less elaborately ornamented, so it wasn't as great as the Jomon, was of superior manufacture, meaning they used better material. But ours wasn't about the strength. Ours was about using the materials that work with your body and your health. Not about what was the strongest. Being made on a wheel and turned out in a more varied assortment of sizes and shapes, the Yayo people were clearly of Mongoloid stock. They were also quite clearly in touch with the higher Chinese civilization of the continent, from which their agriculture techniques may have come, and which was the origin of their early, largely ritualistic use of bronze objects. Excavation of Yayo sediments, such as the amazingly complete one at Toro in Shizuoka Prefecture, revealed that these people lived in villages with closely grouped earthen floor huts. The huts were thatched, placed over structures of wooden posts and beams. Such villages were clustered along streams or on coastal plains, where it was possible to build paddy fields enclosed by stockade-style dikes and fed by irrigation ditches. They just came in and took our shit. We had the irrigation ditches. And then they brought our technology down there and did it there. And then they tell you, the Jomon people, all they did was pottery. They don't know shit. The Yayo people brought with them the horse and the cow, though not in abundance. Their implements were chiefly farm tools, wooden hoes, rakes, and spades, stone celts, and harvesting knives, but they also produced stone arrow points and fishing implements. It appears that from the beginning the Yayo people were able to smelt iron and forge simple tools, and on occasion hoe was tipped with iron. The Yayo dead were buried more ostentatiously than Jomon did, who were interred at their campsites. Stone and earthenware jars were used as coffin and burial sites, which were removed from the village. Low mounds placed over the grave seems to presage the practice of dolmen building, which flourished between the 3rd and 6th centuries AD. The spread the spread of the Yayo culture into Japan was rapid. From its beginning in northern Kyushu, it probably reached the Kanto plain by the end of the 1st century BC. Beyond the Kanto, a distinct frontier came into existence. However, it had Jomon remnants, perhaps intermixed with Anu groups. That's the Anu people, is the Jomon women mixed with the Anu Indo-European men, to which the Japanese gave the name Imishi or Izo, which I told you that's their name. A frontier that was not entirely eradicated until the 9th century, while the two cultures were different and appeared to have been carried by people of different ethnic composition between them, except in this northern region. Oh, there is no need to postulate a violent confrontation between them except in this northern region. Rather, throughout western and central Japan, Yayo people and their culture overlaid and fused readily with the existing Jomon inhabitants, the Afro-Asiatic people, the full-bearded lions. To say that we have no clear evidence of the original provenance of the Yayo people is to not deny the evidence that they probably moved into Japan from southern Korea, or the general occasion of such movement in Surmisable for the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC were turbulent ones in East Asia. The extensive wars that united the Chinese kingdoms into the Qin Empire in 221 BC had raged for nearly 2 centuries and had accompanied by constant military activity against the nomadic tribes to the north. Unity had thrust Chinese armies even further afield toward northern Korea, and as a result, Chinese immigrants had begun to flow in that direction. The succeeding Han Dynasty actually invaded Korean peninsula, conquering the state of Chosun in 108 BC and establishing the commandery of Lolang, with its capital at modern Pyongyang. Thus, the period of unification and expansion of the Chinese under the Qin and Han emperors set up new movements of peoples along the expanding frontiers and sent out new waves of cultural influence that affected both Korea and Japan. So Korea was probably Afro-Asiatic too, and Japan too, and they came in and pushed everybody up. These events of the continent were reflected not only in the original migration of the Yayo people, but their subsequent culture development as well. In later Yayo sites, numerous Chinese objects are found, such as bronze coins and mirrors from the former Han Dynasty, and the influx of such objects continued for many years. But before 2 centuries had elapsed, the Yayo people themselves began to cast bronze artifacts of types that uses only remotely related to possible continental models. Particularly distinctive were large bronze bells and broad, thin ceremonial weapons such as spears, swords, and halberds. And isn't that what the American artifacts is? of the ancient culture, who I believe is the Canaanites. The casting of weapons predominated in northern Kyushu and the inland sea region. Bells have been found more prevalent in the eastern end of the inland sea and farther to the east, while bronze weapons have been found in Korea and bronze bells were common in China. These were functional implements, whereas in Japan both types of bronze casting were completely non-functional and appear to have been used for symbolic purposes only. Whether the two regions marked out by differences in bronze artifacts reveal variations in the origin or ethnic composition of their inhabitants is not ascertainable. But there is evidence that the Yayo people were of many subgroups, Canaanites, perhaps organized into tribes that were sometimes at odds with each other from the time they moved into the Japanese islands. The archaeological record in Japan continues to offer evidence of successive cultures changing in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. About the middle of the 3rd century, members of the ruling elite in the Yamato Plain area, the highly developed region at the eastern end of the inland sea, began to erect huge earthen mounds as burial tombs. So they killed your ass, made tombs out of your bodies. Within another half century, this practice had widespread westward into northern Kyushu, moving against the easterly